Remember those COVID years? You were working from home, you were getting things done, the meetings, the deadlines, all of it. And you also went out on your government allotted exercise, the lunch ride, the turbo session before the family woke up. Zwift was absolutely booming. You were keeping yourself healthy and keeping yourself sane. The work got done and you had time for yourself. Now, there's pressure from your boss's boss to go back 5 days in the office, presence, being seen at your desk. And the assumption underneath all of that is that the effort needs to be visible to be real, that if nobody sees you working, maybe you're not working, you're just chilling. But you know the work got done from home, you lived it. Presence and productivity aren't the same thing. You don't have to be seen working to be working. And I've been thinking about how this applies to training. I coach a lot of riders with full-time jobs, many with families, kids, partners, all the life stuff that doesn't pause because you want to get on your bike. Now, for those riders, they're not looking at 30-hour weeks. They're looking for 6, maybe 8, sometimes much less, squeezed into early mornings, lunch breaks, the gap after the kids go to bed. And those hours are precious. They're non-negotiable. So the question matters, how do you not waste them? Here's the trap, and it's a subtle one. You finish a ride, you're sweating, heart rate was up the whole time, your legs are tired, you're cooked. And that feels like training. All the signals say, yes, this counted, this was real, and you did something. And then there's the other kind of ride. You finish and you're not wrecked. You could have gone harder. You could have done a little bit more. And it feels like cheating, honestly. Was that even training? Same logic as the office. If it doesn't look like work, if it doesn't feel like work, it doesn't count. But here's the disconnect. How hard something feels and whether it's actually working are different things. And we're not very good at telling them apart. The ride that leaves you wrecked might be doing less than you think, and the ride that feels like cheating might be exactly what you need. And that's uncomfortable. It goes against something deep in how we think about effort and reward. Okay, quick side note on this because I think it's relevant. There's a version of the suffering equals growth mindset that's become very popular. David Goggins, I just have to say his name, you know what I mean. Stay hard, embrace the suck, the idea that if you're not in pain, you're not improving. And look, there's something to it. There really is. Mental toughness matters. The ability to push through discomfort, to keep going when every cell in your body says stop. That's real and it's valuable in racing, in hard intervals and hard rides, in life sometimes. But here's what I think gets lost in the translation. Goggins is talking about mental limits, about the story you tell yourself when things get hard, about not quitting when quitting is the easy option. And that's a real thing. The governor in your head that says stop before you actually need to stop. But that's different from the physiology of adaptation. Your mind might have untapped reserves. Your muscles and mitochondria don't care about your mindset. They respond to stimulus and recovery, stress and rest, the right dose at the right time. Suffering more doesn't equal adapting more. It's not a linear relationship. And there's a point, and it comes sooner than most people think, where more suffering is just more fatigue, more breakdown without the building back up. The Goggins mindset is useful for those moments when you need to dig in, the hard interval that you want to quit, the last hour of a race where you just need to make it to that breakaway, the day when nothing in you wants to start. It's not useful as a daily training philosophy. Stay hard every session, you'll stay tired. Stay hard every session, and the sessions that actually need to be hard won't be hard enough because you're buried. And here's the irony, holding back, going easy when easy is prescribed, that requires its own discipline. And it's not the kind that looks good on Strava and impressive on Instagram. But I'll tell you what, for so many people, going easy is the hardest thing there is to do. So what's actually happening when you train? What makes one kind of session productive and another just noise? Training drives adaptations across a continuum. Different intensities emphasize different responses. It's not one thing. Low intensity, sustained work, zone 1 and 2, supports what's called oxidative signaling. Your body responds by building more mitochondria, more capillaries, which results in better fat oxidation so you can spare glycogen for when you really need it. This is the infrastructure for endurance, the machinery that lets you ride for hours and hours and hours without falling apart. And this kind of adaptation is slow. It needs consistency. It needs the intensity to stay low enough that you're actually in that aerobic zone, not creeping above it. Higher intensity stuff like threshold, your VO2 max, the stuff that, the intervals hurt, that adds central and peripheral stimuli that can increase your aerobic power, your maximum ceiling, how hard you can go before the wheels fall off. These adaptations are faster, but they're more stressful. They need recovery. You can't do them every day. Your body needs time to respond to the signal before you send it the next one. So far, so good. Easy rides build the base, hard rides raise the ceiling. And you need both. But here's where it gets interesting. That zone in the middle, moderate intensity, tempo, sweet spot, near sort of your second threshold. This domain can improve performance. I want to be clear about that. It's not useless. It does do something, but it's metabolically costly. It generates quite a significant amount of fatigue relative to its adaptive benefit. And when it dominates your training week, when it's the main and only thing you do, it tends to increase fatigue, reduce the quality of hard sessions, and limit your body's ability to accumulate that low intensity volume that builds your base. The cost benefit ratio shifts. You're paying more than you're getting back. And there's this thing about the middle zone. It's seductive. It feels like training. Absolutely. You're working, you're sweating, your heart rate is up, you finish tired. All the signals say this counts. But the signals, they're misleading. The tiredness isn't evidence of progress. It's just evidence of stress. And stress without that adequate recovery, without the right distribution, without the easy days to absorb it, that's just accumulating fatigue. I see this all the time. Rider trains consistently, puts in the hours. Every ride is moderately hard. They're not slacking. No, they're definitely working, but nothing moves. Or it moves for a while, quick gains at first, then it stops, plateaus completely. Fatigue that doesn't clear, that feeling that something's wrong, but not knowing what. Looking busy, not getting anywhere. Sound familiar? When researchers look at how elite endurance athletes actually train, patterns do emerge, but they're messier than the simple story you might have heard. Elite athletes typically accumulate most of their training below that first threshold, like easy stuff. Smaller doses above the second threshold, like the hard stuff. And the middle zone is present but limited in training. The 80-20 split gets talked about a lot. 80% easy, 20% hard. But here's a complication. That split is a rough description of one pattern, not a universal law. Across seasons and sports, the distribution can look polarized in some phases and pyramidal in others. Some athletes thrive on more threshold work, some don't. The observed proportions depend really on how intensity is quantified, the session goal, the heart rate, power, lactate, and where those threshold boundaries are actually set. Change the definition and the numbers shift. Contemporary scientific reviews emphasize that strong claims about polarized training being sort of optimal aren't well supported by the evidence. Effects depend on context, training status, event demands, and individual response. So I'm not going to tell you there's one right way. There isn't. The science doesn't support that. The pattern is consistent enough to be worth paying attention to. A lot of easy, some hard, and not much in between. So what does this look like for somebody with only 6 hours of training a week? The intuition is, I don't have time for easy rides. Every session needs to count. Maximum training stress per hour. Can't afford to waste time just spinning along, going nowhere. This leads to a particular kind of training. Every ride moderately hard, tempo, sweet spot, that productive feeling middle zone. And the logic makes complete sense. If you've only got 6 hours, you need to make them count. Surely you need to be working. But here's the problem. Working and adapting aren't the same thing. If high proportions of that moderate intensity are raising your fatigue faster than your fitness, you're not making those hours count. You're spending them on stress that doesn't convert to anything useful. Same input, different output, depends what that input is actually doing to you. So for time-limited athletes, the evidence suggests two viable approaches. The first, mostly easy, plus 1 or 2 high-intensity sessions per week, closer to polarized. That lower intensity builds the aerobic base, the hard sessions push the ceiling upwards, the middle zone is kept minimal. The second is that pyramid, some temporal threshold and mix, but limited. The frequency is controlled and that recovery is protected. Now, both can work. Research shows polarized tends to produce larger improvements in VO2 peak, especially in shorter interventions for trained athletes. But time trial performance and threshold measures often show similar outcomes across the distributions. The scientific positioning here is better framed as managing the trade-offs between the two ideas than condemning one model. For the riders I work with, the ones that have got the jobs, the families, the 6 hours a week if they're lucky, it usually comes down to something like this. 2 genuinely hard sessions, the intervals that push, threshold efforts that really test you, sessions where you finish knowing you worked. Not kind of hard, but actually hard. The rest, controlled, zone 1 to zone 2, below that first threshold. And that's the difficult part, accepting that most of your training won't feel like training. I need to say something about zone 2 here because it does get misunderstood. Zone 2 isn't easy. It's not a recovery ride. It's not spinning along, chatting, barely turning on the pedals. That's your zone 1. That's your active recovery. It's a different thing entirely. Zone 2 is controlled aerobic work. You're at the upper end of your aerobic system. Your heart rate is going to be elevated. You're breathing and you're working, but you're not going anaerobic. You're not accumulating lactate faster than you can clear it. And it doesn't feel hard. That's not the point. It's not supposed to. It's not nothing. It's specific. It's deliberate. It's where that aerobic infrastructure actually gets built. The mitochondria, the capillaries, the stuff that lets everything else work. The talk test here is a decent proxy. If you can have a conversation with somebody in 4 sentences, you're probably in the right range. If your heart rate drift over a long effort is sort of climbing and climbing at that constant power, you might be going too high. But these are total approximations. Threshold locations vary between people and change with fitness. Testing helps you get to it, but so does paying attention to how effort feels and what the numbers say. The point is here that easy means something specific. Easy doesn't just mean not hard. It's below that first threshold, it's sustainable, it's not generating the fatigue signature of harder work. And here's where it gets psychologically difficult. Holding back when you feel good is harder than pushing when you feel bad. There's a discipline to easy riding that doesn't feel like discipline. You're out on the road, your legs feel decent, there's a segment coming up, or somebody, God forbid, tries to pass you. Or maybe there's just a little rise and you think, I just push over it. And then your zone 2 isn't zone 2 anymore. You've drifted into the middle. You've added stress that you don't have the budget for. You've compromised recovery you needed for a harder session later in the week. The easy days creep up in intensity until nothing is truly easy, and then nothing can be truly hard. Everything is just a medium, the grey zone expanding until that's all there is. Whatever method you use to keep the easy days honest, use it. The point is that controlled days need to stay controlled. That's not weakness, that's a discipline that makes your hard days actually hard. Not everything has to be sweat and balls to the wall and lungs burning and questioning your life choices. The easy rides are doing something, you just can't see it. It's not as obvious. And it's the same as working from home. The output is real, even if nobody's watching, even if it doesn't look like effort. You don't have to be seen training to be training. One more thing, recovery weeks, because I think it often gets missed. Every 4 weeks, backing off significantly, perhaps halving the volume, halving the intensity. I won't go deep on this. We're going to have a whole future conversation about recovery, but the principle matters here. Adaptation requires rest. Training provides the stimulus. The change happens when you're not training. For people with stressful jobs, family demands, broken sleep, you're not a pro who can sleep 9 hours and sit on the couch between sessions. Your capacity to absorb training is already compromised. The training has to fit around the life, not the other way around. Now, I don't have a clean prescription that works for everyone, but 2 days hard with the rest easy might be right for you. A pyramidal approach with more variety might fit better. As I've mentioned, the evidence doesn't strongly favour one over the other for all people in all situations. What the evidence does suggest, though, is that when moderate intensity dominates, problems tend to accumulate. Fatigue outpaces the adaptation. Recovery suffers. Plateaus happen. And what I've observed coaching, most riders are doing too much in the middle and not enough at the edges. Too much of that feels like work, not enough actually is. So here's where I land. Those COVID years prove something. You don't have to be seen working to be working. The output was was real and you had time for yourself. Now they want you back at the desk. Fine, that's the game at work. Maybe you play it, maybe you don't have a choice. But those with subscriptions and their nice kit, they're not going to pay for themselves. But your training hours, they're still yours. And in those hours, the same principle applies. You don't have to look like you're training to be training. The zone 2 ride that feels too easy, it's building something. The recovery week where you barely touch the bike, that's where the adaptation happens. Not everything has to be visible. Not everything has to hurt. Protect the easy days so you can make the hard days count. Don't let that middle zone expand until it's all you do. You've got 6 hours, maybe less. Kids, job, life. Don't waste them trying to look busy on the bike. Thank you, saddle up, and take it easy. Don't work too hard. Cheers.